Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to be joined by my friend and business partner, Mr. Michael Vincent. We do these sustainability shows every week. I'm sure you've seen Michael's coverage over the years, and we work together on fuel reduction, emissions reduction, and plastics waste reduction with a common theme of net savings. So it's fun work.
Hey, man, it's great. Hey, did you like my new Madonna entry?
That was good. I thought that might have been Madonna for a second.
Vogue, baby.
Vogue. That's right, Vogue.
You remember it? Vogue.
I do remember it. Absolutely.
But yeah, no, I love what we're doing, brother. If it's sustainable, we're in it, man, and in it to help people and really proving that sustainability is actually, when you get to it, it's the basics of really sound business.
Yeah.
Right? Is right. Really what it is. Eliminating waste, right? Yep. And improving efficiencies and reducing costs. That's really your sustainability, right? When you get into, and even when you bastardize the real meaning of sustainability and call it environmental, like we're talking about sustainable logistics, meaning it's green, right? Not just, reliable and resilient, but green. It actually makes it reliable and resilient when you're trying, you know what I'm saying? It's actually tremendous what we're doing. It
absolutely is, right? Save money and reduce your environmental impact at the same time. Who doesn't want to do that? Do you know of anybody that goes, you know what? I just want to be dirtier and just use more virgin materials from the earth. I don't know of anybody.
In the plastic side of thing, it comes from the demand from the consumer and the customer is what it comes down to. That's the fight that's going on there. There's certain things and certain packaging, et cetera, that are expected to perform at a specific level, and they can't risk it not. Otherwise, like in pharmaceuticals, for instance, right? Or food packaging, et cetera, right? You can't have it fail and then have millions of dollars of spoiled goods on the shelves, or syringes that don't work, or tubing for IVs that don't work, or whatever, right? So there's that as they develop really the chemistry in it, but it's not a desire to just outright say, no, I'd rather pollute the planet. Right. It's more the technology has to catch up with the desire, if that makes sense.
Right? Yeah. So, I've seen recycled water bottles. That's like everywhere now. But at one point, 10 years ago, it was not very common to see that. The other thing is they had to figure out what is approved by the FDA or not, right? So virgin plastics and resins were approved by the FDA by their production and what they consisted of, and do they leach into materials or not? Well, now after you've made it once and then recycled it, it's not exactly the same polymer anymore. So can it perform the same way? So again, the testing and the technology had to come up to it where the FDA could say, yes, that's food approved. And then insurance companies, et cetera, when something does happen, we're feeling comfortable enough to say, yeah, okay, that's cool. Put it in the water bottles, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Risk avoidance. Yeah, that makes sense. Right?
Yeah.
You don't want people getting sick, obviously. So
no, you really don't. And I mean, even things is like children's toys, right? Okay, let's make all these. They're just toys. They're just Tonka trucks. And if they break, big deal, buy another one and stuff like that. They can put it in their mouth, and therefore it has to be FDA approved plastic as well. So that industry is starting to grow and evolve more. So you see more and more. It's just like fuel. I mean, it's very similar to fuel, right? You can't just dump anything in your tank and say, hey, we're good.
Right. That's true, right? The biodiesels, they had to go through a rigorous set of testing on engines before they finally
Sure. Okay, and there's a whole industry that doesn't want it to succeed either. Same thing in plastics.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like we're in this green transition.
Yeah, sure we are.
We're transitioning to these things, but they have to be proven. And speaking of proof, we have a money-back guarantee at Trucking Tower on fuel reduction of at least 10% or your money back. The proof is what is going to drive it forward.
I thought you were going to say it was in the pudding, but you went
a different. Proof is in the pudding. That's true. We have this idea about a campaign, but I'm not going to go there yet. But proof in the pudding. It's going to be interesting. So
I love it.
But anyways, same thing with plastics, right? They have to be proven not to hurt people in the case of plastics,
not to.
And they have to be proven to be able to be structurally sound, right? I mean, playgrounds eventually will start to have recycled plastic content in them, but they don't right now because you don't want your kid falling through a tube slide because somebody put too much recycled content in it.
Right.
So as we figure these things out, there'll be more and more uses for it. But yeah, it's developing. Yeah. Much
And,
like fuel.
on that
You know what
front,
else is developing?
What's that?
Theft, crime.
Crime, exactly. Our big topic for today is
It never stops, dude. You get a firewall up and they figure their way around it, right? They climb over it, they go around it, they dig underneath it, whatever it happens to be. It's crazy, crazy, crazy.
In the case of today, we're talking about fuel fraud.
Yeah.
So I saw this article on trucknews.com, right?
Yeah.
And it's fuel fraud, the silent epidemic facing the trucking industry. So that really caught my eye. And then I started digging into it a little bit. And man, it's a significant problem. I didn't realize until I dug in a little bit more. But there was a fuel card and telematics company, Motive, did a third-party survey of fleet managers, and they found nearly 50% of them estimate up to 5% of their total fuel spend is fraudulent.
It's crazy.
So they gave an example. In the case of a fleet of 200 trucks, that would be about $500,000 US per year in fraudulent fuel purchases.
It's amazing to me. I mean,
A lot of money.
When you start thinking about that, you start thinking, okay, who's getting a hold of these cards and stealing them? But then you also have to think, is it employee theft? You know what I mean? Because I had a fuel card when I worked at Roadway Express and I had a company car. And so at that time, you had a fuel card for your car, which now you just get a car or a company car. You can just get a company car. You just write off your mileage or whatever it happens to be. But we had this, but you could use it on your own personal vehicle. Now, eventually the miles wouldn't add up, right? But you could do it for a while if you need. I never did it, but I mean, you possibly could. How are they doing this? How is this happening?
There's one example in here that's really interesting. So Jim Ward, the president of the Truckload Carriers Association, TCA.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those.
Mississauga. I think that's in Ontario.
It is. I've driven through it.
Okay. So he was recently at the TCA's Bridging Borders Barriers Conference, and he had this stark warning about fuel theft. He said, quote, "It's cartels," he said, "of who is behind the increasingly sophisticated fuel fraud scheme." So that's one. I'm sure that's just one of, but that one was one that stood out to him.
Yeah, and he's pointing towards the sophistication and how quickly it can happen, and that's why I think he's going toward cartels. I don't know that he knows who the leaders are or anything like that, or anybody importing hippos into Mississauga. little reference to our men down in Colombia.
No, it's like technology. It's like,
yeah,
you
use your card here, and a half hour later, they're buying it 2,000 miles away.
How's that possible?
Electronic fraud, and therefore it's got to be sophisticated in some way, and then hence the cartel or whatever it is. But it really could be just, I don't know how it works, dude. I would be guessing at how it works. I do know this. I've had a couple of my cards over the years where they call and just say, "Hey, this looks fraud. Are you like here doing this?" No, I'm not. And thank God that has, they have that ability to figure that out, that you can't be in Cleveland, Ohio buying gas and in Tijuana buying tequila at the same time. It doesn't work.
Right. No, not unless you're driving a rocket. And I don't think they sell rocket fuel at the fueling stations. Last time I checked, they're not selling rocket fuel at the.
No, but they do at the liquor store.
Oh, that's true. 200 proof. Put that in your engine. See what happens.
I'm telling you, in Ohio, you can get grain alcohol. So, but yeah, it's crazy how they're doing it. So let me ask you this though, Eddie. I mean, when you're thinking about these things, doesn't it seem like you and I could figure out how to make it safer? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I got a card, I can go and just tap it. Boom. I can use my phone, buy it, right? I could put it in a wallet that nobody can scan it as they walk by and like bump me on the butt and scan my cards and steal all my money, right? Which is a thing. Okay, so you got all this type of stuff. Why can't the proximity of the truck trigger the card to be used? Or why can't the truck be the card?
Right.
Am I losing my mind here? I mean, doesn't that seem like it'd be a fairly easy thing to do with RFID tags, is just have you pull up and you hit that button on your truck and it fires that thing up, and boom, from inside the engine somewhere in an encrypted box, a transponder lights up and says, yep, he needs 50 gallons of fuel. Give it to him.
Right. No, that's a good thought. Right.
Or did I just give away something we could have patented?
We could have sold that if you would have brought it up on air, but that's okay.
Well, it's not live. We're not live. You can cut that out.
We've honestly, you and I got enough things going.
Yeah, we do.
Now.
You're gonna have that. You guys gonna have that one. Just send me a royalty check.
That's right. That's right. But no, you're right. With technology the way it is today, you should be able to do things like algorithms and checks on things and RFID and make sure that truck is authorized to buy. And then, like you said, boom. Here you go.
Yeah, it would seem like somebody like our good friend Jordan Graff at Highway, who can figure it out for, validating truck driver or fleets, etc., and brokers would be able to figure out something like this. I mean, it doesn't seem like it would be that hard of a thing to figure out how to make it a safe transaction. I don't know. A card in a driver's hand just seems like so 2000.
Right. And speaking of, early 2000s,
Yeah.
I was at Appian Logistics Software at the time.
Yeah.
And we came out with a system that would take your planned route and then your GPS trail and compare. And nobody had done that before. And the things that we uncovered were astonishing.
Oh, I bet.
Right?
I bet.
Just
I
one
bet.
example. There was this truck driver, and he liked to meet another truck driver at a Burger King every week. And it was 20 miles out of route for one and 15 miles out of route for the other.
Wow.
And we didn't know. They didn't know, right? It's guys on a route and going around. And they stopped there for a lunch every week. And that was just one example. Then we found another one. There was a guy that liked to take naps. And that's okay. I mean, you need naps. But if you're on a duty cycle getting paid, he would pull off into this park area that was near to his next stop and sleep for an hour and a half.
Were these guys LTL guys or just on long
That
distance?
was dedicated private fleet, that one.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
That was a food service run.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
But you just didn't know because you didn't have the data or the logic.
But yeah, you're right. But we were taught at Roadway Express, they had what was called an F9, and that's just the form number when you looked in the operations manual. And they had an operations manual, no lie, that thick. Told you everything was in there. And I remember an F9. So they had which was just a pickup and delivery card, and they wrote down their time and their mileage at stop, what they did, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But we were taught very specifically how to audit those things very, very fast and find fraud like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's,
and you can
catch people pretty quick. Everybody's watch, if you look at what time it is extremely rare that you're going to look at the time and it's going to be exactly 9:05 or 9:10 or 9:15 or 10:05 or 10:20. There's always a 0 and a 5 is very rare. And if you look at it, someone's thing and they look down and all their times are 0s and 5s, they're lazy. One, and there's almost always a fudge in there somewhere.
Right.
That's the first thing you always look for were 0s and 5s. Too many 0s and 5s. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. We're gonna have to take a closer look at this one.
Yeah. Well, my very, very first job in trucking ever was entering driver logs into a spreadsheet in Lotus 123. And the idea behind it was calculate unload rates and setup times at every account, and then find those accounts that are giving you detention. They're making you park for an hour or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Unintended consequence is we found fraud, you
do. When you start studying those times, there's so obvious anomalies, right? And because
Then you put it in a spreadsheet, and we did the same thing. We put it in a spreadsheet, but then you start calculating miles per hour and stuff like that, and it becomes really obvious what's going on.
Yeah,
somebody's doing 60 miles an hour in downtown Altoona, Pennsylvania. Probably not accurate.
Probably not happening. No, that's the kind of stuff, right? Oh, this guy couldn't have driven 100 miles an hour between these two locations, so
yeah, not going to happen. Not right. Exactly.
But, man, yeah, but on the flip side of all of that, I've met so many awesome drivers, awesome executives.
Oh, amen. Yes,
it's the small percentage, but if 5% is what they're saying they believe is fraud, that's significant amount.
But that includes not drivers too.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I only put forth that I wondered how many use it for their personal. There's got to be a few that are dumb enough to do that. I have to believe that 5% includes a certain percentage that do that, but we're talking about theft outside, because the driver isn't the one who's buying gas in Mississauga and in Lake City, Florida at the same time, right? That's obviously fraud, and they're not selling their own card, right?
Agreed.
Let's clear that up. And vast majority of drivers that I ever had were absolutely phenomenal human beings. Nothing wrong whatsoever.
Me too. Of that 17 years I spent with the group of companies at Appian, then TMW, and then Trimble, a lot of the dispatchers that I worked with were truck drivers. It just makes sense. Right? They were truck drivers. They said, "You're really good at that. Would you like to maybe dispatch some trucks?" I said, "I'll try it out." And then they became the dispatchers, and then they became like the head of the department of logistics. But anyways, bottom line, vast majority did a great job and were out to benefit the company. Like they were working hard to drive the company forward.
I'll tell you, it's the same as, because in the same article, trucknews.com, in the same article, they briefly touch on freight theft, right? And it's interesting because, like, in the LTL world where I was, where I started my career in LTL at Roadway Express, it was always a common thought that the theft was happening internal, right? It was off the docks, it was off the break bulk docks and all this other kind of stuff, right? Or it was lost, misrouted, which over OS&D was a thing, right? Overages, shortages, and damages. Okay. And I always contended there's no such thing as a shortage. Okay. What does that mean? Did it disappear into the universe of nothingness? No, it's still there, and somebody received it. And if they received it, then it was an overage. If they didn't report that overage, that's called theft. So there's overage, theft, and damages is what there is, right?
Right.
In my mind. But what we did, which was really interesting, because you got a piece of freight that maybe has, or a shipment that maybe has possibly 200 pieces to it, that's moving literally from Bangor, Maine to San Diego and crossing 5 or 6 different terminals on its route to get there, easily lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
We put locks on our P&D trucks. Okay. As soon as it left the dock, it was locked by the driver.
Right.
It was and the drive. So then when the driver backed up against the dock, because now we're talking about LTL, they're rolling doors, right? You're not swinging doors anymore. So you back up against the dock. Prior to that, a shipper or a consignee could go up and just open that door before the driver was anywhere near the back of that truck.
Right.
Because they had to go check in and get onto the dock and stuff, right?
Yep.
We put a lock on there. 40% of our thefts evaporated.
That makes sense. That makes sense, right? No, it's unfortunate, and fraud is everywhere. It's like we're living in a world of fraud. I mean, seriously, there's my ATM card has been hacked before.
Yeah, mine too. Sure.
Which is a major pain, because once they figure it out, they go, "I'm going to have to give you a new card number." And then you're like, okay, well, I have like 15 auto pay things on that card. Like electricity. I might need electricity for the house. So
absolutely right. Yeah.
It's just a pain. And then freight fraud. It mentions freight fraud. I mean, like people literally picking up a trailer and just going somewhere and bye-bye. It's gone,
Oh, those are the worst. I had a container, a 53-footer or
it's a 40-foot high cube full of flat panel TVs going to Bluebeard's Castle in St. Thomas, in Charlotte Mile, St. Thomas, that just disappeared.
Gone.
They took the whole container.
Right. So
We
how
found
much
the
was that
chassis.
thing
We found the
worth?
chassis in the yard. We found a chassis in the yard in South Miami by the Miami River. That's it. They didn't bother to unload it. They just took the box. Like,
Do you remember about how much that particular cargo load was worth?
so we're talking about 2001.
Yeah.
So like flat screen TVs were worth a hell of a lot more than they are now.
Right.
They cost a hell of a lot more. So I don't forget how many were in there, but each one of those suckers in there was worth a couple grand easy,
Right.
if not more.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot of money. And it was, it's, yeah, there you go. That happens down in Miami all the time, up and down that river.
Yep.
Because customs does what customs can do, but when you got a ship that's sitting in the Miami River and it's being loaded, or you've got all these little NVOCCs that are literally just a TEU or maybe a 40-footer sitting in someone's backyard being filled with freight, and then when it's done, Jamaica Lines is in business and they go load it on a trailer on Burnouth Lines, who then takes it to Kingston. That's Jamaica Lines, for instance. Not really, but I'm just using it as for instance. That occurs. There's like Andy Hedrick shipping, Caribbean shipping. All it is once a month you rent a 20-foot ocean container, sit in your backyard, and people book passage for the next ship. You just sell LTL or LCL. And when it's full, you lock it and you call Burnouth Lines or somebody like that and say, hey, take this to Kingston. Boom. That's it. No, customs isn't looking at your stuff. Very rarely that they're going to.
It's interesting you talk about TVs because I did a project many, many years ago. This is 1997. And it was helping a electronics manufacturer streamline some kitting lines and manufacture warranty repairs and so forth. As a part of that, I was looking into freight, right? Look at the freight. What's going on with freight? And we found 40 full trailers with TVs that were unaccounted for.
Wow.
And weirdest thing, man, I was at a hotel in Texas and a guy comes up to me and he was the VP of security, never met the man. He said, Andy, thank you for what you found. Leave it alone now because you don't want to be poking around in that anymore. We got it. We got it. You uncovered something. We've got it. And thank you. But you don't want to be the one driving around town with 40 container loads of TVs, with trailers in this case, trailers of TVs that you've uncovered. That's not a good thing. So
yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's a big target on you, right? Yeah,
that was not. It was like, why are all these TVs over here in this area of the yard, and there's no freight bill? Nobody knows where they came from. There's no tracking of the inventory. It was just all black market, off the books stuff. And boy, that was an eye opener. Goodness.
Yeah. Some question. Yeah. Sometimes you go. Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Here you go, and I will see you later.
Yeah, I'm out of here. Yeah, ignorance is bliss every once in a while.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, so unfortunately, we live in a world where there is a significant amount of fraud. We've lived through it, both of us.
Sure.
And but there is on the bright side. There's technology now that finds those things, and my credit card company will call me and go, hey, are you shopping in Florida right now? Because you just made a purchase in Oklahoma City. I don't think you're there, but are you there? And I'm like, no, I didn't buy that. No, that's not me. Okay, well, we shut that down. So that's good.
That's it. It is. But yeah, I don't know how you watch out for this. I don't know how you get it. But it's like I said, it's running. I mean, it's a desperation of the times, I think. Does it seem to go? Is it worse now than it does get worse? But is it worse at some times and not others? Or it's just that we pay attention to it more at certain times?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because catalytic converter theft was huge when I was a kid, when they first came out, right? And people understood that they were worth money. It was huge. And then I never heard of it again until like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like people are still stealing catalytic converters for real?
No, and stealing copper off of air conditioning units, right?
Yeah.
And now when I drive around town, you'll see these cages around the air conditioners, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to allow somebody to rip off all the copper from their air conditioning units. In the summer of Oklahoma, when it gets to be 100, you don't want to get to the office and it be 115 degrees inside. So
that's true. You can lock up the air conditioning unit.
But this is an interesting thing. This is an interesting study with some inputs from some, technology companies as well as leadership in trucking. So something we'll keep an eye on, I'm sure. That'll do it for this show this week. It's always fun, Michael. Thanks again for your insights and inputs.
You're more than welcome, Andy. I like how we get way off topic sometimes.
We always tie it back together somehow.
Yeah, well, you just keep, it's like, Arlo Guthrie taught me that it always comes around. You know what I'm saying? The song Allison's Restaurant, just wait for it. It'll come around.
It'll come back around. You'll see what we're doing here. We'll see.
We'll get there. We'll be able to tie it in. Just keep talking. We'll tie it in eventually.
Oh, man. Well, thanks again, Michael. That'll do it for this week. Thanks for listening or watching, everybody. And we will see you again the next time.
Right on. Peace and love.